Bullied plus-size employee becomes CEO's wife. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead as Candace Morris gripped her tablet, watching her quarterly analysis flash across the conference room screen. 23 faces stared back at her from around the mahogany table, but only one pair of eyes held the cruelty she'd come to expect. "Well, well," Sienna Hartwell's voice cut through the silence. "Look who's trying to play with the big kids again." Candace's heart hammered against her ribs. She'd spent 3 weeks perfecting this presentation, triple-checking every calculation, but Sienna's smirk told her it wouldn't matter. "Your numbers are wrong," Sienna continued, rising from her chair with predatory grace. "Again. Maybe if you spent less time at the vending machine and more time working, you'd understand basic market analysis." The conference room fell silent. Candace felt heat crawl up her neck as 23 pairs of eyes shifted between her and Sienna. Her mind went blank, all those hours of preparation dissolving under the weight of public humiliation. "Actually," a deep voice cut through the tension, "her numbers are perfect." Every head turned toward the door. Allesio Vaughn stood in the doorway, 6 feet 2 inches of controlled power in a charcoal suit that emphasized his broad shoulders. His deep blue eyes swept the room before settling on Sienna with Arctic precision. "In fact," he continued, stepping into the room, "Candace's analysis just saved us $2 million. Candace's breath caught. The CEO of Atlas Industries knew her name. More shocking still, he was defending her." Allesio moved to the front of the room, his presence commanding immediate attention. "While some of you were focused on personal attacks, Candace identified a critical flaw in our Johnson contract. Her projections show a market shift that would have cost us significantly." His gaze found Candace's, and something electric passed between them. For a moment, she forgot about Sienna's cruelty, forgot about the 23 witnesses to her humiliation. All she could see were those blue eyes looking at her like she mattered. "Sienna," Allesio's voice turned cold as winter steel. "My office, now." As the room emptied, Candace remained frozen in place, her tablet clutched against her chest. She'd spent 4 years at Atlas Industries being invisible, being the target of Sienna's cruelty, accepting that she'd never be more than background noise. But Allesio Vaughn had just seen her, really seen her, and the way he'd looked at her, like she was worth defending. What happens when a woman who's never felt worthy meets a man who's forgotten how to feel? When success means everything but love means nothing? How do 2 broken hearts find their way to each other? If you haven't already, hit that subscribe button and join our Dear Love Diaries family. Your special place in this community of heartfelt stories is waiting for you. These passionate journeys of souls connecting, against all odds, have brought together thousands of beautiful hearts just like yours. Make sure you hit the bell too, so you'll know immediately when a new story unfolds in our diary of love. 6 months earlier, Candace had walked into Atlas Industries with hope burning bright in her chest and her business degree still warm from graduation. She'd believed talent would speak louder than appearance, that intelligence would trump prejudice. How naive she'd been. The marketing department occupied the 15th floor of the glass tower that housed Atlas Industries, a monument to Allesio Vaughn's transformation of his father's small construction company into a corporate empire. Candace's cubicle sat in the back corner, as far from the executive offices as geography would allow. She'd chosen the spot deliberately. Visibility bred vulnerability, and she'd learned to avoid both. Her computer hummed as spreadsheets filled the screen, numbers dancing in patterns that told stories most people couldn't read. Data analysis had always been her sanctuary, a world where logic ruled and bias held no power. In the realm of statistics and projections, a person's worth was measured by accuracy, not appearance. "Morning, Buttercup." Carmen Rodriguez slid her coffee mug onto Candace's desk, dark eyes sparkling with mischief. "You're here early, even for you." Candace glanced at the clock, 7:15 a.m. The office wouldn't come alive for another hour, but she'd always preferred the quiet morning hours when she could work without Sienna's hovering presence. "Johnson Project," Candace explained, gesturing at her screen. "Something's not adding up with their market projections." Carmen leaned closer, her shoulder brushing Candace's. They'd bonded during orientation 4 years ago, two women of color in a predominantly white corporate landscape. Where Candace chose invisibility, Carmen wielded confidence like armor, refusing to shrink for anyone's comfort. "You've been obsessing over this for weeks," Carmen observed. "Maybe it's time to present your findings." Candace's stomach clenched. "You know what happens when I speak up." "Sienna's a bitch, but she's not invincible." Carmen's voice carried the fierce loyalty that had sustained their friendship through 4 years of workplace warfare. "Your analysis is brilliant, Candace. Don't let her intimidate you into hiding it." Through the glass walls of the conference room, Candace could see early arrivals filtering into the building. Soon, Sienna would arrive with her perfectly styled blonde hair and designer clothes, ready to begin another day of torture disguised as professional critique. "She's not wrong about everything," Candace whispered, her hands smoothing over her black blazer. She'd chosen the outfit carefully, conservative, unremarkable, designed to blend into shadows. "Stop." Carmen's voice was sharp. "Don't you dare internalize her poison." But the poison had already taken root, hadn't it? 4 years of being called incompetent, lazy, unprofessional. 4 years of watching opportunities go to less qualified candidates whose resumes didn't include size 16 measurements. 4 years of believing that maybe, just maybe, Sienna was right. At 8:30, the elevator chimed, and Sienna Hartwell emerged like a queen surveying her domain. Everything about her radiated privilege, from her platinum hair to her red-soled shoes, to the way she moved through the office as if she owned every inch of space. Her gray eyes found Candace immediately. "Morning, ladies." Sienna's voice dripped false sweetness. "I hope everyone's ready for today's presentation. Some of us have actual work to do." The barb hit its mark as always. Candace's shoulders tensed, her confidence evaporating like morning mist. She was 39 years old, brilliant enough to earn her MBA summa cum laude, but Sienna could reduce her to that insecure girl who'd been taunted in school hallways with a single glance. Carmen squeezed her shoulder. "Remember what we talked about?" The conference room filled gradually. Marketing managers, project coordinators, and department heads claimed their seats around the polished table. Candace took her usual spot in the back, tablet in hand, prepared to present 4 weeks of meticulous research. Her phone buzzed with a text from her mother. "Today's your day, baby girl. Show them what Grace Morris raised." The mention of her mother sent warmth through her chest. Grace Morris had cleaned office buildings for 30 years to put Candace through college, never missing a tuition payment despite working 3 jobs. She'd taught her daughter that worth came from character, not appearance, but the corporate world operated by different rules. "All right, people," Sienna commanded attention from the head of the table. "Let's see what our data team has prepared for the Johnson presentation." Candace's throat went dry. This was it, the moment to speak up or stay silent, to trust her analysis or accept another day of invisibility. She stood on trembling legs, her tablet clutched like a shield. "Actually," her voice cracked slightly, "I found some concerning patterns in their projections." The room shifted. 23 faces turned her way, expressions ranging from surprise to impatience. "Oh, how interesting," Sienna purred. "Please enlighten us." Candace's finger trembled as she connected her tablet to the display screen. Her analysis filled the wall, charts, graphs, and projections that represented weeks of work. "The demographic shifts in their target market don't support their revenue projections," she began, her voice growing stronger. "Based on census data and buying pattern analysis, their assumptions are off by approximately 30%. Murmurs rippled through the room. A few department heads leaned forward, studying her charts with interest. "Furthermore," Candace continued, encouraged by their attention, "if we proceed with their original timeline, we'll miss the seasonal buying surge that represents 40% of annual sales in this category." She was finding her rhythm now, lost in the beauty of data that told clear, undeniable stories. This was her element, her expertise, her value. "So what you're saying," Sienna's voice cut through her confidence like a blade, "is that our clients, successful business owners who've built million-dollar companies, don't understand their own market." The room temperature seemed to drop. Candace felt the shift immediately, the way attention moved from her analysis to Sienna's challenge. I'm saying the data suggests, Sienna rose from her chair, that someone without any real-world business experience is questioning professionals with decades of success. Heat flooded Candace's cheeks. Every insecurity she'd battled came rushing back. The imposter syndrome, the fear that she didn't belong in these rooms, the voice that whispered she was exactly what Sienna said she was. Look, Sienna continued, moving closer with each word. I appreciate your enthusiasm, but maybe stick to basic data entry and leave strategic analysis to people with actual qualifications. The words hit like physical blows. Candace's vision blurred as humiliation washed over her. She'd been stupid to think anything had changed, stupid to believe her work could speak louder than prejudice. Your numbers are wrong. Sienna's voice grew stronger, playing to her audience now. Again, maybe if you spent less time at the vending machine and more time actually working, you'd understand basic market analysis. Silence fell like a curtain. 23 people watched her public destruction, some with pity, others with uncomfortable fascination. Candace wanted to disappear, to sink through the floor and never face another conference room, another presentation, another moment of being seen and found wanting. Then the door opened. Actually, her numbers are perfect. The voice cut through the tension like a sword through silk. Every head turned toward the doorway where Allesio Vaughn stood, 6 feet 2 inches of controlled power that made the spacious conference room feel suddenly small. Candace's breath caught in her throat. She'd seen him before, brief glimpses in elevators, distant figures in executive meetings, but never this close, never with his attention focused entirely on her. His dark hair was perfectly styled, his charcoal suit tailored to emphasize broad shoulders that spoke of hours in the gym rather than behind a desk. But it was his eyes that captured her, deep blue like ocean depths, intelligent and assessing as they swept the room before settling on Sienna with Arctic precision. In fact, he continued, stepping into the room with the casual confidence of a man who owned everything he surveyed, Candace's analysis just saved us $2 million. The words hit the room like a shockwave. Sienna's face went pale, her predatory smile faltering for the first time in 4 years. Allesio moved to the front of the room, and Candace found herself studying the way he moved. Controlled power in every step, authority that didn't need to be announced because it simply was. She'd spent so many nights wondering what it would feel like to be protected by someone like him, wondering if a man that strong could find beauty in curves like hers. The thought sent heat through her stomach, a slow burn that had nothing to do with humiliation and everything to do with the way his presence filled the space around him. While some of you were focused on personal attacks, his voice carried the edge of steel beneath silk. Candace identified a critical flaw in our Johnson contract. Her projections show a market shift that would have cost us significantly. His gaze found hers across the room, and the world narrowed to that single point of connection. In his eyes, she saw something she'd never experienced before, recognition, not of her appearance or her limitations, but of her value, her worth. The heat in her stomach intensified, spreading through her chest like wildfire. God, he was beautiful. Not pretty boy handsome, but masculine in a way that made her wonder what those hands would feel like against her skin, whether he was strong enough to lift her like she weighed nothing. The demographic analysis alone, Allesio continued, his eyes still locked on hers, demonstrates market intelligence that our competitors would pay millions to access. Her seasonal timing projections are flawless. Candace's knees went weak. He wasn't just defending her. He understood her work, really understood it. Behind the devastating good looks and commanding presence was a mind that could match hers, data point for data point. Sienna. His voice turned to winter again as he shifted his attention to the marketing manager. My office. Now. The dismissal was absolute. Sienna gathered her things with shaking hands, her face flushed with humiliation that mirrored what Candace had felt moments earlier. But where Candace's embarrassment had been unjust, Sienna's was earned. As the room emptied, Candace remained frozen in place, her tablet clutched against her chest like armor. People filed past her, some avoiding eye contact, others offering apologetic smiles, but she barely noticed. Her attention remained fixed on Allesio, who was studying her presentation materials with genuine interest. "This is exceptional work," he said without looking up. "How long have you been tracking these patterns?" 6 weeks, she managed, her voice barely above a whisper. "I noticed discrepancies in their initial data and started digging deeper." He finally looked at her, and the intensity in his blue eyes made her stomach flip. 6 weeks of your own time. She nodded, unable to trust her voice. The truth was, she'd worked evenings and weekends, driven by the need to be absolutely certain before speaking up. She'd learned the hard way, that being wrong as someone like her carried consequences, that being wrong as someone like Sienna never would. "Why didn't you bring this to management sooner?" The question hung between them, loaded with implications she wasn't sure how to navigate. How could she explain 4 years of being dismissed, ignored, and systematically undermined? How could she tell him that people like her didn't typically get hearings in rooms like this? "I wanted to be sure," she said finally. Something shifted in his expression, understanding perhaps, or recognition. "You were right to be thorough," he said. "But next time, bring analysis like this directly to me. My door is always open for work this caliber." Next time. The words sent a thrill through her chest. He was talking to her like she had value, like her insights mattered, like there would be opportunities ahead instead of just endless repetition of today's humiliation. "Thank you," she whispered. He gathered her charts, his fingers brushing hers as he took the tablet. The contact lasted only seconds, but it sent electricity shooting up her arm. His hands were exactly as she'd imagined, strong, warm, capable of handling her like she was precious rather than fragile. "Candace," he said, and hearing her name in his voice made her pulse race. "Excellent work." Then he was gone, leaving her alone in the conference room with the scent of his cologne and the memory of blue eyes that had seen her worth. For the first time in 4 years, Candace Morris felt like she belonged. But as she walked back to her cubicle on unsteady legs, one question burned through her mind. What did it mean that the most powerful man in the building knew her name? And why did the way he'd looked at her make her feel like she was finally, truly alive? Chapter 2. The executive elevator hummed as it climbed toward the 30th floor, carrying Candace toward a summons that had arrived 2 hours after the conference room incident. Allesio Vaughn's assistant had delivered the message personally. "Mr. Vaughn requests your presence in his office at 4 p.m. to discuss the Johnson analysis." Candace's reflection stared back at her from the polished steel doors. Wide, dark eyes, nervous energy she couldn't quite contain, curves that her black blazer couldn't entirely hide. She'd changed her outfit 3 times before settling on conservative professionalism, then spent 20 minutes second-guessing the choice. The doors opened to reveal the executive floor. Marble floors, original artwork, floor-to-ceiling windows that offered commanding views of the city below. Everything about the space whispered power and success, making her feel more out of place than ever. "Ms. Morris," a polished woman in her 50s approached with a warm smile. "I'm Patricia, Mr. Vaughn's assistant. He's waiting for you." Double doors opened to reveal an office that took her breath away. The space was massive, larger than most apartments, with a sitting area, conference table, and desk that could land aircraft. But it was the man behind the desk who made her pulse skip. Allesio stood as she entered, and Candace had to remind herself to breathe. He'd removed his suit jacket, revealing a white dress shirt that clung to his muscular frame. His sleeves were rolled up, exposing forearms that spoke of physical labor rather than boardroom softness. The sight made her wonder what those arms would feel like wrapped around her, whether he was strong enough to make her feel small and protected instead of oversized and awkward. "Candace," his voice carried that same warm authority from the conference room. "Thank you for coming up." "Thank you for defending me," she said, then immediately worried she sounded too grateful, too needy. I defended accuracy, he replied, moving around the desk toward her. Your analysis was flawless. I should be thanking you for preventing a costly mistake. He gestured toward the sitting area, 2 leather chairs flanking a coffee table, intimate enough for conversation, but not so close as to feel inappropriate. As they settled into chairs, Candace became acutely aware of his size, the way his presence filled the space around him. Tell me about yourself, he said, leaning back in his chair with genuine interest. How long have you been with Atlas? 4 years, she replied, trying to ignore how his blue eyes seemed to see straight through her defenses. I started right after graduation. MBA from Northwestern, he said, and her surprise must have shown on her face because he smiled, the first real smile she'd seen from him. I make it my business to know my employees' qualifications. Summa cum laude, if I recall correctly. Heat flooded her cheeks. He'd looked up her file, had taken the time to learn about her background. The attention felt overwhelming and intoxicating at the same time. Why marketing? He asked. With your analytical skills, you could have chosen finance, operations, any number of departments. The question touched on dreams she'd buried long ago. I wanted to understand what makes people connect with brands, with stories. Numbers tell you what happened, but marketing tells you why. Something shifted in his expression. Surprise, perhaps, or recognition. That's remarkably insightful. Most people see marketing as surface-level manipulation. Maybe that's why our campaigns lack authenticity, she said, then immediately worried she'd overstepped. I mean, not to criticize. You're absolutely right, he interrupted. We've been playing it safe, following formulas instead of creating genuine connections. What would you do differently? The question opened floodgates she'd kept sealed. For the next hour, they talked about consumer psychology, authentic storytelling, the difference between selling products and building relationships. Allesio listened with an intensity that made her feel like the only person in the world, asking questions that showed he understood not just her words but the passion behind them. You should be leading campaigns, not analyzing other people's work, he said finally. I'm not exactly leadership material, she replied automatically, the response so ingrained she didn't think before speaking. His expression darkened. According to whom? The question hung between them, loaded with implications she wasn't prepared to explore. According to Sienna, according to the hiring managers who'd passed her over for promotions, according to the voice in her head that whispered she didn't belong in rooms like this. I just meant, I know what you meant, he said softly. And you're wrong. The words hit her like a physical impact. When was the last time someone had contradicted her self-doubt with such quiet certainty? When had anyone looked at her and seen leadership potential instead of limitations? Mr. Vaughn. Allesio, he corrected, and I want you to consider something. What if the problem isn't your qualifications or potential? What if the problem is an environment that doesn't recognize brilliance when it doesn't fit conventional expectations? Her breath caught. He was talking about Sienna, about the systematic undermining, about all the ways she'd been made to feel less than worthy. But more than that, he was suggesting the fault lay with them, not her. I don't know how to be anything else, she whispered. Then let me show you. The words sent heat spiraling through her stomach. There was nothing overtly sexual in his tone, but something in his eyes made her pulse race. The way he looked at her, like she was worthy of being seen, of being known, awakened desires she'd spent years suppressing. I have a proposition, he continued. Atlas is launching a new product line in 6 months. I want you to lead the marketing strategy. Candace's world tilted. Lead? But I'm just an analyst. You're brilliant, he said with quiet conviction, and it's time everyone else realized it. Sienna reports to me. His voice carried that edge of steel again. As do all department heads, your qualifications speak for themselves. The offer hung between them, representing everything she'd dreamed of and never dared reach for. But accepting meant stepping into the spotlight, making herself a target, risking the comfortable invisibility that had protected her from deeper wounds. Why? She asked. Why me? He leaned forward, his eyes intense. Because you see what others miss, because you ask the right questions instead of accepting convenient answers, because talent like yours is rare and wasting it is criminal." His words washed over her like sunlight after years in shadow. For a moment, she allowed herself to imagine it, leading meetings instead of hiding in corners, having her ideas heard and implemented, earning respect through achievement rather than begging for basic courtesy. "I'd need to think about it," she said. "Of course. But Candace?" He stood, and she found herself looking up at him, acutely aware of his height, his presence, the way her body responded to his proximity. "Don't let fear make the decision for you." As she rode the elevator back to her floor, Candace's mind raced. The offer was everything she'd wanted, but accepting it meant trusting him, trusting herself, trusting that she could be more than Sienna's favorite target. The elevator stopped at the 15th floor, and the doors opened to reveal Tucker Vaughn waiting to board. Allesio's younger brother shared the same commanding height and blue eyes, but where Allesio radiated controlled power, Tucker carried himself with the casual arrogance of inherited privilege. "Well, well," Tucker's voice dripped with practiced charm as he stepped into the elevator. "Candace Morris, isn't it? I heard you caused quite a stir in the marketing department today." Her stomach clenched. If Tucker knew about the conference room incident, it meant the story was spreading through the executive ranks. "I just presented some analysis." "Analysis that contradicted our clients," Tucker said, his tone deceptively light. "Allesio seems quite impressed with your insights." There was something in the way he said it that made her skin crawl, like her competence was somehow suspicious, like there had to be ulterior motives for Allesio's support. "The data was accurate," she said quietly. "I'm sure it was." Tucker smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Just be careful not to let success go to your head. This company has standards to maintain." The elevator reached her floor, and Candace escaped into the familiar chaos of the marketing department. But Tucker's words followed her, carrying implications that made her stomach twist with anxiety. Carmen looked up from her desk as Candace approached, dark eyes immediately reading her expression. "How did it go?" "He offered me the Morrison campaign," Candace said, sinking into her chair. "Lead marketing strategist." Carmen's coffee mug hit her desk with a heavy thump. "Are you kidding me? Candace, that's incredible. That's everything you've worked for." "It's everything I've dreamed about," Candace corrected. "There's a difference." "What do you mean?" Candace gestured around the office where conversations had stopped when she'd returned, where eyes followed her movements with newfound interest. "Look at them. Yesterday I was invisible. Today I'm a curiosity. What happens when I fail?" "What happens when you succeed?" Carmen countered. "What happens when you finally show everyone what I've known for 4 years, that you're the smartest person in this building?" The words sparked something in Candace's chest, a flicker of the confidence she'd felt in Allesio's office. But doubt crept in just as quickly, whispering all the reasons she wasn't ready, wasn't qualified, wasn't enough. "Tucker Vaughn cornered me in the elevator," she said, "made it clear that the company has standards to maintain." Carmen's expression darkened. "Screw Tucker Vaughn and his entitled ass. You earned this opportunity." "Did I? Or did Allesio offer it because he feels sorry for me?" The question hung between them, voicing the fear that had been growing since she'd left his office. What if his support was pity rather than recognition? What if she was a charity case rather than a valued employee? "Girl," Carmen's voice turned fierce. "You need to stop this right now. I've watched you work for 4 years. I've seen you solve problems that stumped senior analysts, create insights that should have earned you 3 promotions by now. Allesio Vaughn didn't offer you this job because he feels sorry for you. He offered it because he's smart enough to recognize talent." The conviction in her friend's voice made something ease in Candace's chest. Carmen had been her anchor through 4 years of workplace storms, the voice of reason when self-doubt threatened to drown her. "What if I'm not ready?" "Nobody's ever ready," Carmen said softly. "But you're capable. And more importantly, you deserve this chance." That evening, Candace sat in her small apartment, staring at her laptop screen. The Morrison campaign brief filled the monitor, a new line of luxury home goods targeting affluent millennials. Her phone buzzed with a text from her mother. "How was your day, baby girl?" Before she could second-guess herself, Candace called. "Mama," she said when Grace Morris answered, her mother's warm voice instantly soothing her frayed nerves. "Candace, what's wrong? You sound upset." "I got offered a promotion today, lead marketing strategist for a major campaign." Silence stretched across the line, then Grace's delighted laugh filled the space. "Baby, that's wonderful. I'm so proud of you." "I'm scared," Candace admitted. "What if I can't do it? What if I fail?" "Listen to me." Grace's voice turned serious. "You think I wasn't scared when I enrolled you in that private school? When I took out loans for your college education? When I watched you walk across that stage with your MBA? Candace smiled despite her anxiety. "You never showed it." "Because showing fear would have given it power over us. Baby girl, you've been preparing for this opportunity your whole life. Everything you've learned, every challenge you've overcome, has been building toward this moment." "The CEO defended me today," Candace said. "In front of the whole marketing department. It felt like someone finally saw your worth," Grace finished, "because that's exactly what happened." After they hung up, Candace returned to her laptop. The Morrison brief stared back at her, but now instead of intimidation, she felt the familiar spark of excitement that came with a challenging puzzle. She opened a new document and began typing. Morrison Campaign Strategy, Consumer Psychology and Authentic Engagement. For the next 3 hours, she lost herself in the work, developing concepts that went beyond surface level. Demographics to explore the emotional drivers behind purchasing decisions. She created personas, mapped customer journeys, identified the gap between what competitors were offering and what consumers actually wanted. It was nearly midnight when she finally stopped, her dining room table covered with notes, sketches, and printed research. She'd created something remarkable, a campaign strategy that was both innovative and grounded in solid analysis. More importantly, she'd remembered why she'd chosen marketing in the first place. The thrill of understanding human motivation, of creating connections that transcended commercial transactions, of telling stories that resonated on a deeper level. Her phone buzzed with an email notification. Allesio Vaughn's name appeared in her inbox, sent at 11:47 p.m. "Candace, I hope you'll consider my offer. Atlas needs fresh thinking, and more importantly, it needs leaders who understand that true success comes from authentic connection rather than manipulation. The Morrison campaign could be transformative, but only with the right person leading it. I believe that person is you. Allesio." She read the message 3 times, her pulse quickening with each pass. He wasn't just offering her a job, he was expressing faith in her vision, confidence in her abilities, trust in her potential. But it was the timestamp that made her breath catch. 11:47 p.m. on a Tuesday. He'd been thinking about her, about the conversation, about her potential late into the evening. The realization sent heat spiraling through her stomach. When was the last time she'd been on anyone's mind past business hours? When had someone cared enough about her success to send encouragement at midnight? She closed her laptop and headed to bed, but sleep eluded her. Instead, she lay in the darkness, thinking about blue eyes that saw her worth, about strong hands that could probably span her waist, about a voice that spoke her name like it mattered. For the first time in years, Candace Morris fell asleep imagining what it might feel like to be wanted by someone who could have anyone. The next morning arrived gray and drizzling, the type of weather that made everyone wish they'd stayed in bed. Candace arrived at Atlas earlier than usual, her decision made, but her nerves still jangling. She'd worn a burgundy blazer that brought out the warmth in her dark skin, fitted black pants that emphasized her curves rather than hiding them, and heels that added confidence to her step. If she was going to accept Allesio's offer, she needed to look like someone capable of leading a multi-million-dollar campaign. The elevator ride to the 30th floor felt both eternal and too brief. Patricia greeted her with the same warm smile, but this time, Candace felt less like an intruder and more like someone who belonged in executive spaces. "He's expecting you," Patricia said, gesturing toward the office doors. Allesio stood at the windows, hands clasped behind his back as he surveyed the city below. The rain had intensified, turning the world beyond into an impressionist painting of gray and silver. "Candace," he said without turning around, "I was hoping you'd come." "I accept," she said, her voice stronger than she felt. "The Morrison campaign. I accept your offer." He turned then, and the smile that spread across his face made her pulse race. "I was hoping you'd say that." "I have conditions," she continued, surprising herself with her boldness. His eyebrows rose. "I'm listening. I want to choose my own team. I want direct access to consumer research data, and I want regular check-ins with you personally to ensure the strategy aligns with company vision." The last condition was partially professional necessity and partially selfish desire. She wanted more conversations like yesterday's, more opportunities to see that intensity in his eyes, more chances to feel valued and heard. "Done," he said without hesitation. "When can you start?" "I already have," she replied, pulling a thick folder from her bag. "Preliminary strategy analysis, consumer psychology profiles, and competitive positioning recommendations." His surprise was evident as he accepted the folder, but it quickly transformed into something that looked like admiration. "You did this last night?" "I needed to know I could deliver," she said. "This campaign is too important to approach casually." He opened the folder, his eyes scanning her work with the intensity she remembered from their previous meeting. As he read, his expression shifted from interest to genuine excitement. "This is extraordinary," he said finally. "The psychological profiling alone is more sophisticated than anything our current team has produced." Pride swelled in her chest, warm and unfamiliar. When was the last time someone had called her work extraordinary? "There's more," she said, emboldened by his reaction. "I think Morrison is making a mistake targeting affluent millennials exclusively. The real opportunity is in the cross-generational market, products that appeal to both millennials and their boomer parents who are downsizing." He looked up from the papers, his blue eyes bright with something that might have been admiration. "Explain." For the next hour, they dissected market trends, consumer behavior, and the emotional drivers behind purchasing decisions. Allesio challenged her assumptions, pushed her thinking, and engaged with her ideas in ways that made her feel intellectually alive. "You're going to revolutionize how this company approaches marketing," he said when she finished her presentation. "We're going to revolutionize it," she corrected, then blushed at her presumption. "I mean, with your support and guidance." "Candace," he interrupted, his voice soft but firm. "You don't need my guidance. You need my support, my resources, my protection from the people who will try to undermine you. But you don't need me to tell you how to be brilliant." The words hit her, like lightning illuminating truths she'd been afraid to acknowledge. He wasn't offering to mentor her or shape her. He was offering to clear the path so her natural talents could flourish. "Thank you," she whispered. "Thank you," he replied, "for reminding me why I built this company in the first place." As she left his office with a new title, a substantial raise, and her own team to build, Candace felt something she hadn't experienced in years: hope. But as the elevator descended toward her old floor to collect her things, one thought burned through her mind. The way Allesio had looked at her during their strategy discussion wasn't entirely professional, and the way her body had responded definitely wasn't either. The question was, what did it mean? And more importantly, what was she going to do about it? Chapter 3. 3 weeks into her new role, Candace had learned that success came with its own unique form of torture. The Morrison campaign was exceeding every projection, her team respected her leadership, and Allesio's faith in her abilities had proven justified. But success also meant visibility, and visibility in the corporate world was a double-edged sword for someone like her. "Another late night?" Carmen asked, stopping by Candace's new office, a corner space with actual windows and a door that closed. "Morrison presentation is tomorrow," Candace replied, not looking up from her laptop. "The board wants to see preliminary results before we move to full implementation." "When's the last time you went home before midnight?" Candace finally glanced up. Carmen stood in the doorway with her arms crossed, wearing the expression she reserved for stubborn children and impossible situations. "This campaign is too important," You're going to burn out, Carmen interrupted. And then what happens to your precious campaign? Before Candace could respond, a knock echoed through the office. They both turned to see Allesio in the doorway, looking devastatingly handsome despite the late hour. His tie was loosened, his sleeves rolled up, revealing those forearms that still made her pulse skip. "Sorry to interrupt," he said, his eyes moving between them. "Carmen, good to see you." "Mr. Vaughn," Carmen replied with a knowing smile. "I was just telling Candace she needs to get some sleep." "Actually," Allesio stepped into the office, "I came to see if she needed any help with tomorrow's presentation. I know how important this is." Carmen's smile widened. "Well, I'll leave you two to work. Try not to keep her here all night, boss." After Carmen left, the office felt suddenly intimate. Allesio closed the door behind him, and Candace became acutely aware of being alone with him in a space that smelled like her perfume and contained evidence of her personality. Photos of her mother, a small plant Carmen had given her, the colorful pens she preferred over standard black. "How are you holding up?" he asked, settling into the chair across from her desk. "Good," she lied, then saw his expression and reconsidered. "Tired, nervous, excited, all at the same time. The board is going to love what you've created." "You don't know that." "I do," he said with quiet conviction, "because I've seen the preliminary numbers. Customer engagement is up 40% in test markets. Sales projections are exceeding expectations by 30%. You've created something extraordinary." His praise sent warmth flooding through her chest, but it was accompanied by the familiar anxiety that success might be temporary. What if tomorrow goes wrong? What if they don't like the presentation? "Then we adjust and move forward," he said simply. "But Candace, you need to stop waiting for permission to be brilliant." The words hit her like a physical impact. How had he identified the core of her anxiety so precisely? The fear that she was borrowing someone else's success, that at any moment someone would realize she didn't belong in rooms like this. "I ordered dinner," he continued, checking his watch. "Chinese from that place on 5th. Should be here in 20 minutes. You didn't need to. When's the last time you ate a real meal?" She opened her mouth to protest, then realized she couldn't remember. Coffee and vending machine snacks had sustained her for the past 3 days. "Exactly," he said, reading her expression. "We're both going to eat, review your presentation together, and then you're going home to get actual sleep." The way he said "we" made her stomach flutter. The idea of sharing a meal with him, of having his undivided attention for an hour, was both thrilling and terrifying. "You don't have to babysit me," she said. "I'm not babysitting." His voice carried that edge of steel she'd learned to recognize. "I'm protecting my investment. You're the most valuable asset this company has acquired in years." Asset. The word should have felt clinical. Instead, it made her wonder what it would feel like to be valuable to him in other ways. The food arrived as promised, filling her office with the scent of sesame oil and ginger. Allesio cleared space on her conference table, and they settled across from each other with containers of lo mein and sweet and sour chicken. "Tell me about tomorrow," he said, opening his container with the same controlled precision he applied to everything else. "Standard presentation format," she replied, then caught his expression. "What?" "Standard isn't what got you here." She set down her chopsticks, studying his face. "What do you mean?" "Your Morrison strategy isn't standard. Your consumer insights aren't standard. Your entire approach challenges conventional wisdom." He leaned forward, his blue eyes intense. "Why would you present it in a standard format?" The question sparked something in her mind, a shift in perspective she hadn't considered. "You think I should do something different?" "I think you should be yourself," he said. "The same person who identified flaws in the Johnson contract. The same person who spent 3 weeks revolutionizing our marketing approach. The same person who sees connections that others miss." As they ate, she found herself explaining her real vision for the Morrison campaign, not just the sanitized version she'd prepared for the board, but the bold, innovative strategy that challenged industry assumptions. "You're holding back," he observed when she finished. "The board likes safe." "The board likes results," he corrected, "and safe doesn't generate the numbers you've produced." Their conversation drifted from business to more personal topics. She learned that he'd built Atlas Industries from the ground up after his father's death, that he'd sacrificed relationships and happiness for the success he now has, that he sometimes wondered if the cost had been worth it. "Do you regret it?" she asked, "choosing work over everything else?" "I used to think the question was irrelevant," he said, his eyes meeting hers across the table. "Success was the only metric that mattered. And now I'm wondering if I confused achievement with fulfillment." The words hung between them, loaded with implications that made her pulse race. Was he suggesting that something was missing from his life? That all his success hadn't brought him happiness? "What would fulfillment look like?" she asked softly. He was quiet for a long moment, his gaze never leaving hers. "Connection. Authenticity. Someone who sees past the title and the money to whatever's left underneath." The vulnerability in his voice made her breath catch. This was Allesio Vaughn without his armor, admitting to loneliness despite his success, to wanting something he couldn't buy or build or command into existence. "I should let you get home," he said, breaking the spell. "Thank you," she said, "for dinner, for the advice, for believing in me." "Thank you," he replied, "for reminding me what passion looks like." As he gathered the empty containers, their hands brushed, reaching for the same item. The contact lasted only seconds, but electricity shot up her arm. His fingers were warm, strong, exactly as she'd imagined during countless sleepless nights. He froze, his eyes finding hers. For a moment, the air between them crackling with tension that had nothing to do with business and everything to do with the awareness that had been building for weeks. "Candace," he said, his voice rougher than usual. "Yes?" But whatever he'd been about to say was interrupted by a sharp knock on her office door. They sprang apart like guilty teenagers as Sienna Hartwell's voice cut through the moment. "Candace, are you still here?" Allesio opened the door, and Sienna's expression shifted from predatory to shock. "Mr. Vaughn, I didn't realize you were here." "Sienna," his voice was ice, "working late." "Just checking on our new team leader." Sienna's smile was poison wrapped in professionalism. "Making sure she has everything she needs for tomorrow's presentation." The subtext was clear. She was checking for weaknesses, gathering intelligence, looking for opportunities to undermine Candace's success. "Actually," Allesio said, his presence suddenly filling the doorway, "Candace has exceeded every expectation. The Morrison campaign is performing better than any project this department has produced in 5 years. Sienna's smile faltered. "Of course, I'm sure tomorrow will be educational." After she left, Candace sank into her chair. "She's planning something." "Let her plan," Allesio said grimly. "She's forgotten who she works for." The next morning arrived with a crisp autumn air that promised change. Candace, dressed in her best suit, navy blue with silver accents that brought out the richness of her dark skin. She'd spent an hour on her makeup, wanting to look polished for what could be the most important presentation of her career. The boardroom occupied half of the 31st floor, with walls of windows offering panoramic city views. 12 leather chairs surrounded a mahogany table that reflected the morning light, creating an atmosphere of power and tradition that made her feel like an intruder. Board members filed in gradually, men in expensive suits, a few women who carried themselves with the confidence of those accustomed to being the only female voices in the room. Reuben Boyd, the chairman, took his seat at the head of the table with the authority of someone who'd never questioned his right to be there. Allesio entered last, his presence immediately commanding attention. He wore a charcoal suit that emphasized his broad shoulders, his dark hair perfectly styled, his blue eyes scanning the room with alertness. "Ladies and gentlemen," Reuben called the meeting to order, "we're here to review the Morrison campaign strategy. Allesio tells us we have something revolutionary to consider." Candace stood, her tablet in hand, her heart hammering against her ribs. 12 faces turned toward her with expressions ranging from polite attention to barely concealed skepticism. "The Morrison campaign," she began, her voice stronger than she felt, "represents an opportunity to redefine luxury marketing for a generation that values authenticity over aspiration. She clicked to her first slide, revealing consumer research that challenged conventional wisdom about luxury goods marketing. Traditional luxury marketing relies on exclusivity and aspiration, she continued, her confidence growing as she entered familiar territory. But our research shows that consumers, particularly millennials and Gen Z, are rejecting brands that make them feel inadequate. Murmurs rippled through the room. She saw Ruben's eyebrows rise, noticed other board members leaning forward with interest. Instead, she continued, they're drawn to brands that celebrate authenticity, diversity, and real people living real lives. Morrison's new home goods line gives us the chance to position luxury as accessible elegance rather than unattainable perfection. For the next 30 minutes, she walked them through her strategy: consumer psychology insights, demographic analysis, creative concepts that featured real families in real homes rather than impossible aspirational imagery. Our test markets show 40% higher engagement when we feature diverse body types, ethnicities, and family structures, she explained, her passion evident in every word. Consumers want to see themselves reflected in the brands they choose. Interesting, said Margaret Chen, one of the few female board members. But how does this translate to actual sales? Candace smiled, clicking to her revenue projections. Sales in test markets are exceeding projections by 32%. More importantly, customer retention is up 50% compared to traditional luxury campaigns. The room erupted in surprised murmurs. These weren't incremental improvements. They were game-changing numbers that demanded attention. Furthermore, Candace continued, emboldened by their reaction, this approach positions Atlas Industries as an industry leader in authentic marketing. While our competitors cling to outdated strategies, we become the company that truly understands modern consumers. Ruben leaned back in his chair, his expression thoughtful. These numbers are impressive, but they're based on limited test markets. How confident are you that this approach will scale? Completely confident, she replied without hesitation. The psychological drivers behind these results aren't market-specific, they're generational. Consumers across all demographics are hungry for authenticity. What about pushback from traditional luxury consumers? Asked another board member. Aren't we risking alienating our established customer base? Our research shows that even traditional luxury consumers respond positively to authentic messaging, she answered. They may have grown up with aspirational marketing, but they're parents and grandparents now. They want brands that reflect their family values. For another 20 minutes, they grilled her with questions that tested every aspect of her strategy. But instead of intimidating her, the challenge energized her. This was her expertise, her passion, her chance to prove that different didn't mean less valuable. Any other questions? Ruben asked finally. Margaret Chen raised her hand. Just one. Candace, this strategy represents a significant departure from industry standards. What gave you the confidence to challenge conventional wisdom? The question hit deeper than market analysis or revenue projections. It touched on the core of who she was, why her perspective mattered, why being different could be a strength rather than a liability. Because I am the consumer this strategy targets, she said, her voice ringing with conviction. I know what it feels like to be excluded from marketing messages, to see products positioned for people who don't look like me or live like me. I understand the power of finally feeling seen and valued by a brand. Silence filled the room, but it wasn't the uncomfortable quiet of disapproval. It was the thoughtful pause of people processing a truth they hadn't expected to hear. That, said Margaret Chen with a slow smile, is exactly the insight we need. Ruben looked around the table, reading expressions and gauging consensus. All in favor of approving the Morrison campaign strategy as presented? 12 hands rose in unanimous approval. Candace felt her knees go weak with relief and triumph. She'd done it, not just presented her strategy, but defended it, refined it, and earned the respect of the most powerful people in the company. As board members filed out, offering congratulations and expressing enthusiasm for the campaign launch, Allesio approached her with something that looked like pride in his blue eyes. That, he said quietly, was extraordinary. "Thank you for believing in me," she whispered. "Thank you for proving me right." But as they left the boardroom together, Candace noticed Sienna waiting by the elevators, her expression unreadable. Whatever the marketing manager was planning, Candace had just given her more ammunition, higher visibility, greater stakes, and a more spectacular potential fall. The war for her place at Atlas Industries was just beginning. Don't forget to hit that like button if you're feeling the chemistry between Candace and Allesio, and drop a comment telling us about a time when someone believed in you when you didn't believe in yourself. We love hearing your stories of finding your inner strength. Your experiences inspire us and help build our beautiful community of souls, supporting each other through life's challenges. That evening, Candace sat in her apartment, still buzzing with the adrenaline of success. The board approval meant her strategy would be implemented company-wide, that her vision would shape Atlas Industries' marketing for years to come. Her phone rang, and Grace Morris's voice filled the space with maternal pride. "Baby girl, Carmen called and told me about your presentation. I am so proud I could burst." "Thanks, Mama," Candace said, settling into her couch with a cup of tea. It felt good to finally be heard. "You've always been worth hearing," Grace replied firmly. "Some people just took too long to listen." They talked for an hour about the presentation, about Candace's new responsibilities, about the dreams that were finally becoming reality. But as the conversation wound down, Grace's tone shifted. "Candace, there's something different in your voice." "What do you mean?" "You sound alive, more alive than you've sounded in years." The observation hit home. Grace was right. She did feel more alive, more vibrant, more like the woman she'd always wanted to be. "There's this man," she began hesitantly, "the CEO who defended you?" "Yes, Allesio. He makes me feel like I matter." Grace was quiet for a long moment. "Be careful, baby girl. Men like that can be complicated." "What do you mean?" "Powerful men often see what they want to see. Make sure he's seeing the real you, not just a reflection of his own needs." After they hung up, Candace sat in the gathering darkness, thinking about her mother's warning. Was Allesio interested in her as a person, or was she simply a novelty, the brilliant woman who challenged his assumptions? But then she remembered the way he'd looked at her during dinner, the vulnerability in his voice when he'd talked about wanting authentic connection, the electricity that had sparked between them when their hands touched. Whatever was happening between them, it felt real. It felt like the beginning of something that could change everything. The question was she brave enough to find out what that something might be? Chapter 4. Success, Candace discovered, painted an even bigger target on her back than failure ever had. The Morrison campaign launch was scheduled for Monday morning, which meant the week leading up to it transformed Atlas Industries into a pressure cooker of corporate politics and barely concealed sabotage. Candace's team worked around the clock, refining creative elements and coordinating with media buyers, while Sienna Hartwell circled like a shark scenting blood in the water. "She's been asking questions," Ayumi Patel warned during their Friday afternoon meeting. The HR director had become an unexpected ally, someone who understood the particular challenges facing women of color in corporate environments. "What kind of questions?" Candace asked, though her stomach already knew the answer. "About your qualifications, your work history, whether you're receiving special treatment." The euphemism hung between them, loaded with implications that made Candace's skin crawl. Special treatment. As if her brilliant analysis and revolutionary strategy were somehow tainted by her gender or appearance, as if success for someone like her required explanation beyond competence. "She's building a case," Ayumi continued, "documenting every meeting you have with Allesio, every decision that goes in your favor. She's looking for patterns she can present as evidence of impropriety." "There is no impropriety," Candace said firmly, even as heat flooded her cheeks at the memory of blue eyes across a dinner table, of hands touching over takeout containers, of moments that felt charged with possibility. "I know that," Ayumi replied gently, "but perception can be as damaging as reality in corporate politics." That evening, Candace stayed late again, fine-tuning the Morrison presentation materials. The office was nearly empty, just security guards and the occasional workaholic burning the midnight oil. She'd sent her team home hours ago, insisting they rest before Monday's launch, but she couldn't quiet her own nervous energy. The elevator chimed, and Tucker Vaughn emerged, looking like a younger, less substantial version of his brother. Where Allesio carried authority with quiet confidence, Tucker wielded privilege like a weapon, expecting deference he hadn't earned. "Working late again?" he asked, stopping at her office door. "You seem to spend a lot of time here after hours." "The Morrison launch is Monday," she replied. "I want everything perfect." "Of course you do." Tucker stepped into her office uninvited, his eyes scanning the space with proprietorial interest. Impressive promotion for someone so new to leadership. The pause before new carried weight, suggesting her leadership was questionable, temporary, possibly unearned. "Allesio believes in recognizing talent," she said. "Allesio believes in many things." Tucker's smile didn't reach his eyes. Sometimes his enthusiasm clouds his judgment. "What's that supposed to mean?" Tucker moved closer to her desk, and Candace fought the urge to step back. Where Alessio's presence felt protective, Tucker's felt invasive. "My brother has always had a weakness for projects, causes, people who need saving." Tucker's voice carried casual cruelty. "But charity work shouldn't compromise business decisions." The words hit like physical blows. Charity work. As if her promotion was philanthropy rather than recognition of merit, as if she was a cause Allesio had taken up rather than a valuable employee. "I earned this position," she said, her voice shaking with suppressed anger. "Did you?" Tucker's question hung in the air like poison. "Or did you simply provide the right inspiration at the right moment?" Before she could respond, the elevator chimed again. Allesio emerged, his expression darkening as he took in the scene. Tucker looming over her desk, Candace's face flushed with humiliation and anger. "Tucker," Allesio's voice could have frozen hell. "What are you doing here?" "Just checking on our rising star," Tucker replied, his tone shifting to false innocence, "making sure she has everything she needs for Monday." "She has everything she needs," Allesio said, moving into the office, "including my complete confidence in her abilities." Tucker's smile tightened. "Of course she does. Your confidence in her is notable." The brothers faced each other across her office, and Candace felt the weight of family dynamics she didn't understand. But she understood the subtext. Tucker was challenging not just her position, but Allesio's judgment, suggesting their working relationship was compromised by personal interest. "I should go," Tucker said finally. "Big day Monday. Wouldn't want anything to complicate the launch." After he left, silence filled the office like smoke. Allesio stood at her window, his hands clenched into fists, his reflection tense in the darkened glass. "He's trying to undermine you," Candace said quietly. "He's trying to undermine us both," Allesio replied without turning around. "Tucker has never forgiven me for inheriting control of the company." "Why doesn't he like me?" Allesio turned then, his blue eyes blazing with an emotion she couldn't name. "Because you threaten everything he believes about who deserves success in this world. Because you challenge his assumptions about power and privilege. Because you're brilliant and beautiful, and he can't diminish either quality." Beautiful. The word hung between them, loaded with implications that made her pulse race. He'd called her beautiful, not as casual flattery, but as simple fact, the way he might observe that the sky was blue or fire was hot. "Allesio," she whispered. "I should go," he said abruptly. "Let you finish your work." But instead of leaving, he moved closer to her desk. "Candace, I need you to know something. Whatever happens Monday, whatever rumors Sienna spreads or challenges Tucker raises, you earned your position. Your work speaks for itself." "Does it?" The question escaped before she could stop it, carrying all her accumulated doubts and fears. "Or am I just your diversity hire? Your pet project?" His expression shifted, hurt flashing across his features. "Is that what you think? That I promoted you to feel better about myself?" "I don't know what to think," she admitted. Everyone keeps suggesting there are ulterior motives, that my success is somehow suspect. Maybe they're right. They're not, he said firmly, moving around her desk until he stood directly in front of her. They're threatened by change, by excellence that doesn't fit their narrow definitions. They're attacking you because they can't compete with you. His proximity made her breath catch. She could smell his cologne, see the 5 o'clock shadow that darkened his jaw, feel the heat radiating from his body. When he looked at her like this, with complete focus and unwavering support, she felt like she could conquer the world. "I want to believe that," she whispered. "Then believe it," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "Believe in yourself the way I believe in you." Their eyes locked, and the air between them crackled with tension that had nothing to do with business and everything to do with the desire that had been building for weeks. She wondered what it would feel like to close the distance between them, to discover if his lips were as commanding as his voice, if his hands would worship her curves or simply possess them. The spell was broken by her phone buzzing with a text from Carmen. "Girl, you better not still be at that office. Go home and get some sleep before Monday." Allesio stepped back, the moment lost, but the tension still humming between them. "Carmen's right," he said. "You should go home. Monday will be here soon enough." As she gathered her things, he remained in her office, studying the presentations materials she'd left on her desk. "Candace," he said as she reached the door. "Yes?" "They're going to try to tear you down Monday. Sienna, Tucker, maybe others. But remember, you've already won. The board approved your strategy unanimously. The test markets exceed every projection. Nothing they say can change those facts." "What if it's not enough?" "It will be," he said with quiet conviction. "Because you're not just defending a campaign anymore. You're changing the entire culture of this company." Monday morning arrived with the promise of either triumph or disaster. Candace had spent the weekend alternating between confidence and terror, practicing her presentation until she could deliver it in her sleep, then lying awake, imagining everything that could go wrong. She dressed in her most powerful outfit, a black suit with emerald accents that brought out the richness of her skin, heels that added confidence to her step, jewelry that caught the light when she moved. If today was going to be a battle, she'd wear armor that made her feel invincible. The Atlas Industries lobby buzzed with unusual energy. Media representatives, industry analysts, and potential clients had gathered for the Morrison campaign launch, turning the typical Monday morning into a corporate event that would be discussed in trade publications for weeks. "Ready for this?" Carmen asked, appearing at her elbow with 2 cups of coffee and a fierce smile. "As ready as I'll ever be," Candace replied, accepting the caffeine gratefully. "You've got this," Carmen said firmly, "and if anyone tries to tear you down, they'll have to go through me first." The presentation theater occupied the entire second floor, with stadium seating that accommodated 200 people and technology that could broadcast to Atlas offices worldwide. As guests filed in, Candace spotted familiar faces, board members who'd approved her strategy, department heads who'd been skeptical, industry journalists whose reviews could make or break careers. "Ladies and gentlemen," Reuben Boyd took the stage, his voice carrying the authority of decades in corporate leadership. "Today marks a significant evolution in Atlas Industries' marketing approach. We're proud to introduce a campaign that challenges industry conventions while delivering unprecedented results." He gestured toward the wings, and Candace took a deep breath. This was it, the moment that would either establish her as a force in the industry or destroy her credibility forever. "Please welcome the architect of our Morrison strategy, Candace Morris." She walked onto the stage, her heels clicking against the polished floor, her confidence growing with each step. The audience stretched before her, 200 faces representing the power structure of Atlas Industries and the broader business community. "The Morrison campaign," she began, her voice clear and strong, "represents more than a product launch. It represents a fundamental shift in how luxury brands connect with modern consumers." For the next hour, she walked them through her strategy with the passion and precision that had convinced the board weeks earlier. She showed them test market results, consumer feedback, and projections that painted a picture of revolutionary success. "Traditional luxury marketing tells consumers they're not enough," she explained, clicking to a slide showing conventional advertising. Our approach tells them they're perfect exactly as they are. The audience was engaged, asking thoughtful questions and responding with enthusiasm to her data-driven arguments. But Candace could feel hostile energy from certain sections. Sienna and her allies, Tucker and his supporters, people who saw her success as a threat to their own positions. "Questions?" she asked as her presentation concluded. Sienna's hand shot up immediately. "Candace, this strategy represents a significant gamble with company resources. What assurance do we have that your unconventional approach will resonate beyond limited test markets?" The question was designed to undermine her credibility while appearing legitimate, but Candace had prepared for this exact challenge. "The psychological principles underlying this strategy aren't market-specific," she replied calmly. "They're universal human needs for acceptance and authenticity. Our research shows consistent results across demographics, geographies, and cultural segments." "But surely," Sienna pressed, "such a departure from industry standards requires extraordinary oversight. How do we ensure quality control when the strategy is so personal to its creator?" There it was, the suggestion that her strategy was somehow tainted by her identity, that her perspective invalidated rather than enhanced her judgment. "Every element of this campaign has been tested, validated, and approved by our board," Candace replied, her voice steady despite the fury building in her chest. "Personal experience informed the strategy, but data drives the execution." Tucker raised his hand next. "Given the significant resources invested in this campaign, what safeguards exist if the strategy fails to deliver promised results?" "The same safeguards that exist for any major initiative," she answered. "Continuous monitoring, real-time adjustments, and contingency planning. But I'm confident those safeguards won't be necessary." "Confidence is admirable," Tucker replied with a cold smile. "But overconfidence can be costly. How do we separate genuine market insight from personal advocacy?" The implication was clear, that she was pushing an agenda rather than developing strategy, that her identity compromised her objectivity. Before she could respond, Allesio stood from his seat in the front row. "I'd like to address that question," he said, his voice cutting through the tension like a blade. "Tucker asks about personal advocacy. He's right. This campaign is deeply personal. Personal to every consumer who's been told they're not enough by traditional marketing, personal to every person who's been excluded from aspirational imagery, personal to everyone who's hungry for authenticity in a world of manufactured perfection." He moved toward the stage, commanding attention with every step. Candace's personal experience doesn't compromise her objectivity. It enhances her insight. She understands our target market because she is our target market. That understanding has generated the most successful campaign in Atlas Industries' history. The audience was riveted, sensing they were witnessing more than a business presentation. This was a public declaration of support that went beyond professional endorsement. Furthermore, Allesio continued, his eyes finding hers, questioning the validity of diverse perspectives is exactly the kind of thinking this campaign challenges. Candace Morris represents the future of marketing, brilliant, innovative, and unafraid to challenge assumptions that no longer serve our industry. Silence filled the theater, thick with tension and possibility. Sienna's face had gone pale, Tucker's expression dark with anger. But other faces showed something different: respect, admiration, recognition that they'd witnessed something significant. Margaret Chen stood to applaud, her clapping echoing through the silence until others joined in. Soon, the entire audience was on their feet, their applause washing over Candace like a wave of validation. As the crowd dispersed, industry representatives approached with business cards and collaboration proposals. The Morrison campaign had done more than launch successfully. It had positioned Atlas Industries as an innovative leader in authentic marketing. But Candace barely noticed the accolades. Her attention was fixed on Allesio, who waited at the edge of the stage with something that looked like pride and something else, something deeper and more personal, burning in his blue eyes. "That was incredible," she said when she reached him. "You were incredible," he replied, "and now everyone knows it. Thank you for defending me. Thank you for being worth defending." The words hung between them, loaded with meaning. In defending her publicly, he'd done more than endorse her strategy. He'd chosen her over family loyalty, her vision over corporate conformity, her future over his own political safety. "Allesio," she began, but he held up a hand. "Not here," he said quietly. "Too many eyes, too many ears, but we need to talk." As they left the theater together, Candace felt the weight of changed circumstances. The successful launch had elevated her profile and secured her position, but it had also made her relationship with Allesio a subject of corporate speculation. The question was no longer whether they were attracted to each other. That much was obvious to anyone paying attention. The question was what they planned to do about it, and whether either of them was brave enough to find out where this dangerous chemistry might lead. Because after this morning's public declaration of support, there was no going back to simple courtesy. Whatever was building between them had been acknowledged, witnessed, and set in motion. The only question now was whether they were strong enough to survive the consequences of wanting each other in a world determined to tear them apart. That evening, Candace sat in her apartment, still buzzing from the day's triumph. The Morrison launch had exceeded every expectation, generating industry buzz and client interest that would keep her team busy for months. She should have felt nothing but satisfaction and pride. Instead, she felt unsettled, aware that success had come with complications she hadn't anticipated. Her phone buzzed with a text from Allesio. "Dinner tomorrow? We need to discuss what happens next." What happens next? The word sent heat spiraling through her stomach, carrying implications that went far beyond business strategy. Because after today's public support, after the way he'd looked at her on that stage, after weeks of building tension and restraint, they both knew that whatever happened next would change everything. The question was whether she was brave enough to let it. Chapter 5. The restaurant Allesio chose was the kind of place where titans of industry sealed deals and destroyed reputations over 7-course meals. Tucked away on the 32nd floor of a downtown high-rise, Meridian offered privacy, discretion, and cuisine that commanded 3-month waiting lists. Candace felt out of place the moment she stepped from the elevator into the hushed elegance of marble floors and crystal chandeliers. Her black dress was beautiful. Carmen had insisted she buy it months ago for occasions that never seemed to arrive. But surrounded by women dripping in designer labels and inherited jewelry, she felt like she was playing dress-up in someone else's life. "Ms. Morris," the maître d' approached with an obsequious smile reserved for important guests. "Mr. Vaughn is waiting for you." He led her through the dining room, past tables occupied by faces she recognized from business magazines and society pages. Conversations paused as she passed, eyes following her progress with interest. Allesio stood as she approached, and her breath caught in her throat. He'd changed from his business suit into dark slacks and a charcoal sweater that clung to his muscular frame, making him look less like a CEO and more like a man. Dangerous, attractive, entirely too appealing for her peace of mind. "You look beautiful," he said, his voice carrying that rough edge that made her stomach flutter. "Thank you," she managed, accepting the chair he pulled out for her. "This place is incredible." "I thought we deserved somewhere special," he replied, settling across from her. "After yesterday's triumph." The waiter appeared with wine, a bottle that probably cost more than her monthly rent, and filled their glasses with precision before disappearing into the background. To the Morrison campaign, Allesio raised his glass, and to the brilliant woman who created it. Their glasses touched with a soft chime, but the toast felt like something more significant. The way he looked at her, the intensity in his blue eyes, suggested they were marking a different kind of beginning. "I still can't believe it worked," she admitted, taking a sip of wine that tasted like liquid velvet. "I never doubted it would work," he replied. "Your analysis was flawless, your strategy revolutionary. The only surprise was how quickly the industry took notice." 3 collaboration offers today," she said, still somewhat stunned by the attention. "Major agencies wanting to partner with Atlas on similar campaigns." And what did you tell them? That I'd need to discuss it with my CEO, she replied with a small smile. Your CEO, he said, his voice dropping to that intimate register that made her pulse race, is more interested in discussing what happens between us than what happens with other agencies. The words hung in the air between them, loaded with implications that made her heart hammer against her ribs. This was it, the conversation they'd been dancing around for weeks, the acknowledgement of something that went far beyond professional collaboration. Allesio, she began, but he held up a hand. Let me say this first, he said, his eyes never leaving hers. Yesterday, when I defended you in front of the entire company, it wasn't just about business. It wasn't just about protecting a valuable employee or supporting innovative thinking. He leaned forward, his presence suddenly overwhelming despite the space between them. It was about you, about the way you challenge everything I thought I knew about attraction, about worth, about what it means to find someone who sees past the surface to something real underneath. Her breath caught. You don't know me well enough to... I know you stay late every night to perfect work that's already exceptional, he interrupted. I know you care more about authenticity than approval. I know you'd rather be invisible than fake. I know you see connections that others miss, solutions that others can't imagine. His voice grew rougher with each word, carrying an intensity that made her wonder what it would sound like in different circumstances, in intimate darkness where restraint wasn't necessary. I know, he continued, that you've spent years letting other people define your worth, and I know you're brilliant enough to change the world if you'd just believe in yourself the way I believe in you. Why? She whispered. Why do you believe in me? Because you're extraordinary, he said simply. Because I'm tired of pretending I don't want you. The confession hit her like lightning, illuminating truths she'd been afraid to acknowledge. He wanted her, not as a project or a charity case or a convenient diversity hire, but as a woman, as someone worthy of desire from a man who could have anyone. I'm not the type of woman you usually... You're exactly the kind of woman I want, he said, his voice carrying quiet conviction. Smart enough to challenge me, strong enough to stand up to me, real enough to see past the money and power to whatever's left underneath. The waiter approached with their appetizers, breaking the spell long enough for her to remember they were in public, surrounded by people who would dissect every gesture and expression for signs of scandal. People are watching, she said quietly. Let them watch, he replied, but his tone suggested he understood the complications. Candace, I won't pretend this is simple. Dating someone who works for you creates issues, complications, potential conflicts of interest. Dating, the word escaped before she could stop it. If you're interested, he said, his confidence wavering for the first time since she'd known him. If you feel even a fraction of what I'm feeling. The vulnerability in his voice undid her. This powerful man, this commanding CEO who controlled billion-dollar decisions with casual authority, was asking for something he couldn't buy or demand or simply take. I feel it, she admitted, her voice barely above a whisper. But I'm scared. Of what? Of being your experiment, your walk on the wild side before you go back to whatever kind of woman you're supposed to want. His expression darkened. Is that really what you think of me? I don't know what to think, she said honestly. I've never been in a situation like this before. I've never had someone like you look at me like you're looking at me now. How am I looking at you? Like you want to devour me, she whispered, heat flooding her cheeks at her boldness. His sharp intake of breath was audible. Because I do. The words sent fire racing through her veins. She'd spent so many nights wondering what it would feel like to be wanted by someone like him, fantasizing about those strong hands on her body, that commanding voice whispering her name in darkness. Allesio, she breathed. Come home with me, he said, his voice rough with barely contained desire. Let me show you how extraordinary you are. The invitation hung between them, representing everything she'd dreamed of and everything she feared. Going home with him would change everything, their working relationship, her position in the company, the balance she'd maintained between visibility and vulnerability. But looking into his eyes, seeing the genuine desire and respect burning there, she realized she was tired of protecting herself from possibilities that might hurt her, tired of letting fear make decisions that could determine the rest of her life. Yes, she said, the word barely audible but carrying the weight of absolute commitment. His penthouse occupied the top 2 floors of a building that defined the Chicago skyline, with floor-to-ceiling windows offering panoramic views of the city sprawling below. Everything about the space spoke of wealth and taste. Original artwork, handcrafted furniture, technology seamlessly integrated into living spaces that felt more like a luxury hotel than a home. "Drink?" he asked, moving to a bar that looked like it belonged in an exclusive club. "Wine," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "Whatever you think is best." She wandered to the windows while he poured, studying the city lights that stretched to the horizon. From this height, Chicago looked manageable, controllable, like something that could be commanded by will and intelligence rather than conquered by struggle and determination. "Beautiful view," she said when he joined her with 2 glasses of red wine. "It is now," he replied, his eyes fixed on her rather than the skyline. The compliment sent heat spiraling through her stomach, but it was the intensity in his voice that made her pulse race. He was looking at her like she was the most fascinating thing he'd ever encountered, like solving the mystery of her was worth any amount of time and attention. "Tell me about yourself," he said, settling onto the leather sofa that faced the windows. "The real you, not the work version I know." She joined. Him, hyper-aware of his proximity, of the way his presence seemed to fill the space around them. "What do you want to know?" "Everything," he said simply. "Your childhood, your dreams, the things that make you laugh, the things that keep you awake at night." For the next hour, they talked intensively, which made the rest of the world disappear. She told him about growing up with a single mother who worked 3 jobs to pay for her education, about being the scholarship kid in schools where her classmates' allowances exceeded her mother's salary, about learning to find worth in achievement because she'd never fit conventional definitions of desirability. "Is that why you hide?" he asked gently. "Why you make yourself invisible?" "I learned early that being noticed meant being targeted," she admitted. "Staying quiet, staying small, meant staying safe." "You're not small," he said, his voice carrying an edge that made her stomach clench. "You're magnificent. Every curve, every inch, every part of you that doesn't fit their narrow standards is exactly what makes you extraordinary." His words washed over her like benediction, healing wounds she'd carried so long she'd forgotten they were there. When was the last time someone had celebrated her body instead of tolerating it? When had anyone looked at her curves and seen beauty instead of inconvenience? "I've spent my whole life being told I'm too much," she whispered. "Too big, too loud, too ambitious, too everything." "You're not too much for me," he said, moving closer on the sofa until she could feel his heat, smell his cologne, count the silver threads in his dark hair. "You're exactly enough." Their eyes locked, and the air between them crackled with tension that had been building for weeks. She could see the desire in his face, the restraint that held him back from simply taking what he wanted. "Candace," he said, her name rough on his lips. "Yes?" "I need you to know something before we go any further. This isn't casual for me. This isn't about novelty or experimentation or any of the things you're afraid it might be." "What is it about?" "You," he said simply. "The way you make me feel alive again, the way you challenge me to be better than I've been, the way you see possibilities where others see problems." He reached out, his fingers tracing the line of her jaw with reverent gentleness. "I want to worship every inch of you. I want to show you how beautiful you are, how desirable, how perfect." His touch sent electricity racing through her nerve endings. She'd fantasized about this moment so many times, wondering what his hands would feel like against her skin, whether he'd be gentle or demanding, whether he could make her feel as beautiful as he claimed she was. "I'm scared," she admitted. "Of what?" "Of disappointing you. Of not being what you expect." "You could never disappoint me," he said with quiet conviction. "Do you trust me?" The question hung between them, loaded with implications that went far beyond physical intimacy. Did she trust him with her body, her heart, her vulnerabilities? Did she trust him to see her completely and still find her worthy of desire? "Yes," she whispered. He leaned forward, his lips brushing hers with butterfly softness that made her breath catch. The kiss was gentle, questioning, giving her space to retreat if she chose. But retreat was the last thing on her mind. She deepened the kiss, her hands tangling in his hair, her body coming alive under his touch. He tasted like wine and promise, like everything she'd wanted but never dared reach for. "God, Candace," he groaned against her lips, "you have no idea what you do to me." His hands framed her face, holding her like she was precious, fragile, worthy of careful handling. But she didn't want careful. She wanted passion, fire, and a connection that burned away doubt and left only truth. "Show me," she whispered. He stood, offering his hand with the same gallant gesture he'd used in restaurants and conference rooms. But this time, acceptance meant following him into territory that would change everything between them. She took his hand. His bedroom continued the penthouse's theme of understated luxury. A king-sized bed that dominated the space, more windows offering city views, and lighting that could be adjusted to create any mood from businesslike efficiency to intimate romance. "Second thoughts?" he asked, reading her expression. "1,000 of them," she admitted, "but I don't want to listen to any of them." He smiled, the expression transforming his face from commanding authority to genuine warmth. "Good. Because I plan to spend the rest of the night convincing you that you made the right choice." His lips found hers again, but this time the kiss carried heat that had been banked for weeks. His hands explored her curves with reverent appreciation, mapping territory he'd clearly been imagining for far longer than either of them had admitted. "You're so beautiful," he murmured against her throat, his voice thick with desire. "So soft, so perfect." His words sent fire racing through her veins. She'd spent years believing her body was something to apologize for, something to hide behind loose clothing and self-deprecating humor. But under his touch, she felt like a goddess, powerful, desirable, worthy of worship. "I want to see you," he said, his hands finding the zipper of her dress. "All of you." The request should have terrified her. She'd spent a lifetime avoiding exactly this kind of vulnerability, protecting herself from the moment when someone would see her completely and find her lacking. But looking into his eyes, seeing the genuine desire and admiration burning there, she felt beautiful. For the first time in her life, she felt like someone worth wanting. "Yes," she whispered. The dress pooled at her feet, leaving her standing before him in black lace that Carmen had convinced her to buy during one of their shopping expeditions. She'd never imagined wearing it for anyone, never believed she'd find someone who would appreciate the way the fabric emphasized rather than concealed her curves. "Jesus," he breathed, his eyes drinking in every inch of her. "You're incredible." His hands skimmed her sides, tracing the dip of her waist and the flare of her hips with obvious appreciation. She could see the desire in his face, the way her body affected him, the effort it took for him to maintain control. "Your turn," she said, surprised by her own boldness. He smiled, pulling his sweater over his head to reveal the muscular chest she'd fantasized about during countless sleepless nights. He was exactly as she'd imagined. Broad shoulders, defined abs, the kind of strength that came from actual physical labor rather than gym membership. "I've wanted this for so long," he said, pulling her against him until skin met skin and the sensation nearly buckled her knees. "How long?" she asked. "Since the first day I saw you," he admitted. "Since you stood in that conference room defending your analysis while Sienna tried to tear you down. You were magnificent, and I wanted you more than I'd ever wanted anything." The confession undid her completely. All those weeks of wondering if she was imagining the tension between them, if his support was purely professional, if someone like him could ever truly want someone like her. "I thought I was invisible to you," she whispered. "You've never been invisible to me," he said, his lips finding the sensitive spot where her neck met her shoulder. "You've been the only thing I could see." His mouth moved lower, exploring the curves he'd claimed to worship, proving with actions what words alone couldn't convey. Under his touch, she felt transformed, not into someone else, but into the truest version of herself, the woman who'd been hiding beneath years of doubt and defensive armor. "Allesio," she gasped as sensation overwhelmed thought. "I know," he murmured against her skin. "I feel it too." They moved together with an urgency born of weeks of denied attraction, finally giving way to honest desire. He touched her like she was precious, kissed her like she was necessary, loved her like she was the answer to questions he'd stopped believing had solutions. And for the first time in her life, Candace Morris felt beautiful, not despite her differences, but because of them. Later, they lay tangled in sheets that probably cost more than her monthly salary, her head on his chest, his fingers tracing lazy patterns on her bare shoulder. The city lights painted moving shadows on the ceiling, but she barely noticed. Her entire world had narrowed to the sound of his heartbeat and the warmth of his skin against hers. "What happens now?" she asked softly. "Now," he said, pressing a kiss to the top of her head, "we figure out how to make this work." "It won't be easy," she warned. "People will talk. They'll say I slept my way to success, that you're having a midlife crisis, that we're both making a mistake." "Let them talk," he said with quiet conviction. "I've spent my entire adult life making decisions based on what other people would think, what would be best for business, what would maintain my reputation. For once, I want to make a decision based on what I want." "And what do you want?" "You," he said simply. "In my life, in my bed, in my future. Everything else is just details." The words sent warmth flooding through her chest. After years of believing she wasn't the kind of woman powerful men chose, here was proof that sometimes fairy tales did come true, just not in the ways you expected. "The board will have opinions," she said. "The board will adapt," he replied firmly. "Your work speaks for itself. The Morrison campaign proved your value to this company has nothing to do with our personal relationship. Tucker will. Tucker will learn to keep his opinions to himself." Allesio's voice carried that edge of steel she'd learned to recognize. "Or he'll find himself looking for new employment." The protection in his voice made her feel cherished, defended, worthy of fighting for. She'd spent so long believing she had to face the world's challenges alone that having someone willing to stand with her felt revolutionary. "I love you," the words escaped before she could stop them, carrying months of suppressed feeling and tonight's emotional revelation. He went still beneath her, and for a moment panic fluttered in her chest. Had she moved too fast, revealed too much, shattered the magical bubble they'd created with premature honesty? "Say it again," he said, his voice rough with emotion. "I love you," she repeated, looking up to meet his eyes. "I know it's too soon. I know it complicates everything, but I love you too," he interrupted, his hand cupping her face with infinite gentleness. "I've been falling in love with you since the day you saved us $2 million and made me remember why I started this company in the first place." The confession broke something open in her chest, flooding her with joy so intense it brought tears to her eyes. Love. Real, honest, reciprocated love from a man who could have anyone but chose her. "What happens tomorrow?" she asked. "Tomorrow," he said, pulling her up for a kiss that tasted like promise and possibility, "we start the rest of our lives." But even as he held her, even as she basked in the glow of mutual confession and spectacular lovemaking, a small voice in the back of her mind whispered warnings about the challenges ahead. Because falling in love was the easy part. Making it work in a world determined to tear them apart would require courage neither of them had ever needed before. The question was, were they strong enough to survive what came next? Chapter 6. The next morning brought a corporate crisis that separated strong leaders from pretenders. Candace arrived at Atlas Industries to find her office swarming with HR representatives, her computer sealed with security tape, and Sienna Hartwell wearing a satisfied expression on her face. "What's going on?" Candace demanded, her stomach plummeting as she took in the scene. "Internal investigation," Ayumi Patel replied quietly, her face grim with obligation. "Allegations of impropriety, conflicts of interest, violation of company policy." The words hit like physical blows. Someone had reported her relationship with Allesio, turning their love into corporate scandal that could destroy both their careers. "Who filed the complaint?" she asked, though the answer was obvious from Sienna's triumphant smile. Anonymous tip, Ayumi said, but the allegations are serious enough to warrant immediate investigation. Candace's phone buzzed with a text from Carmen. Emergency board meeting called. Allesio's in Ruben's office. This is bad. The corporate rumor mill worked faster than social media, spreading whispers that transformed love into leverage, passion into misconduct. By lunch, the entire building hummed with speculation about the CEO and his plus-size protege, about whether her success was earned or purchased with sexual favors. You need to resign, Tucker cornered her in the elevator, his voice carrying false sympathy. Make this easy on everyone, especially Allesio. His reputation can survive a momentary lapse in judgment, but not a prolonged scandal. My relationship with Allesio has nothing to do with my work performance, she said firmly. Doesn't matter, Tucker shrugged. Perception is reality in corporate politics. You're a liability now. The elevator opened at her floor, but Tucker's hand blocked her exit. Think about what's best for him, Candace. If you really love my brother, you'll walk away before you destroy everything he's built. The words followed her through the afternoon, as colleagues avoided eye contact and conversation stopped when she approached. She'd become toxic overnight, her presence a reminder of scandal that could contaminate anyone who associated with her. Her phone rang with calls from headhunters offering exit strategies, industry reporters seeking comment on allegations of impropriety at Atlas Industries, and lawyers suggesting she might need legal representation. Only one call mattered. My office. Allesio's voice was clipped, carrying none of the warmth from the night before. Now. The executive elevator felt like a death chamber as it carried her toward what could be the end of everything. Her career, her reputation, her relationship with the only man who'd ever made her feel worthy of love. Patricia's familiar smile was gone, her tone clipped with formality. He's waiting for you, she said without making eye contact. Allesio stood at his windows, hands clasped behind his back, his posture rigid with tension. Everything about his stance screamed controlled fury, but she couldn't tell if the anger was directed at her or the situation. Close the door, he said without turning around. She obeyed, the soft click sounding like a gunshot in the silence. Ruben wants your resignation on his desk by 5 p.m., he said, his voice carrying none of yesterday's warmth. The board is concerned about the company's reputation, potential lawsuits, the appearance of favoritism. Each word cut deeper than the last. And what do you want? He turned then, and she saw the battle raging in his blue eyes, love warring with duty, desire fighting obligation, the man struggling against the CEO. I want to protect you, he said quietly, from this mess, from the gossip, from the people who will spend the next decade questioning every success you achieve. By letting them win? The words escaped with more heat than she'd intended. By proving that someone like me can't survive in your world? By being realistic about the cost of fighting, he replied. Candace, if we continue this relationship, you'll never escape the whispers. Every promotion, every achievement, every success will be tainted by the assumption that you slept your way to the top. The brutal honesty made her flinch, but she forced herself to meet his gaze. And what about you? What do you lose if I walk away? Something cracked in his expression, revealing the pain he'd been hiding beneath corporate composure. Everything that matters. The admission hung between them, loaded with the weight of impossible choices. Stay and fight for a love that would destroy her reputation, or leave and preserve the dignity that had cost her so much to build. There has to be another way, she said desperately. The board is meeting in an hour, he said. They want answers, solutions, assurance that Atlas Industries won't become a cautionary tale about workplace relationships. What will you tell them? He was quiet for a long moment, studying her face like he was memorizing every detail. I don't know. The uncertainty in his voice broke her heart. This powerful man who commanded billion-dollar decisions with casual authority was paralyzed by a choice between love and legacy. I should go, she whispered. The boardroom felt like a tribunal as she entered, facing 12 individuals whose expressions ranged from disappointed to disgusted. These people had applauded her Morrison strategy just days ago, but now she was a problem to be solved rather than an asset to be valued. Candace, Reuben's voice carried judicial gravity, we're here to discuss serious allegations about your conduct and its impact on Atlas Industries. I'm here to defend my integrity, she replied, taking the seat across from their united front. Your integrity isn't in question, Margaret Chen said gently. Your judgment is. Because I fell in love? Because you engaged in a relationship that compromises your professional standing, another board member corrected. Your success with the Morrison campaign is now tainted by the perception that personal factors influence decisions. The words stung because they carried an odd element of truth she couldn't deny. No matter how brilliant her work, how revolutionary her strategies, people would always wonder if her relationship with Allesio had influenced his support. So, what are you suggesting? Resignation, Reuben said bluntly. A graceful exit that preserves your reputation and the company's integrity. We're prepared to offer a generous severance package, excellent references, and assistance finding new employment. The offer was designed to sound reasonable, generous even. But Candace heard it for what it was: payment for disappearing quietly, for not fighting the assumption that talented women who attracted powerful men must be using their bodies rather than their brains. And if I refuse, then you'll face a prolonged investigation that will make your life unbearable, Tucker spoke for the first time, his voice carrying casual cruelty. Gossip, speculation, constant scrutiny of every decision. Is that really what you want? Before she could respond, the boardroom doors opened and Allesio entered. His expression was unreadable, but something in his posture suggested he'd made a decision that would change everything. Ladies and gentlemen, he said, taking a seat at the head of the table, I've called this meeting to address the allegations against Ms. Morris and to clarify Atlas Industries' position on workplace relationships. Candace's heart hammered as she watched him survey the room with the authority of someone accustomed to being obeyed. First, he continued, let me be absolutely clear. Candace Morris earned her position through exceptional talent, innovative thinking, and work that has generated millions in revenue for this company. Any suggestion otherwise is both incorrect and insulting. Murmurs rippled through the room, but his raised hand demanded silence. Second, yes, we are involved in a personal relationship, a relationship that began after her promotion, after her success was already established, after her value to this company was proven beyond question. Reuben leaned forward. Allesio, the appearance of impropriety, is based on assumptions about Ms. Morris that you would never make about a male employee, Allesio interrupted, his voice carrying steel. When Marcus Richardson married his assistant 5 years ago, this board sent a wedding gift. When David Park began dating the head of our legal department, you celebrated their engagement at the company Christmas party. The comparison hit like a sledgehammer, exposing the double standard that made Candace's relationship scandalous, while similar relationships involving men were accepted or celebrated. The difference, Tucker said coldly, is that those relationships never stirred suspicion about career growth. The only question, Allesio replied, his eyes finding Candace's across the table, is whether this board supports talent and innovation, or whether it clings to outdated prejudices that judge women by different standards than men. He stood, commanding the room's complete attention. Candace Morris has revolutionized our marketing approach, generated unprecedented revenue, and proven herself one of the most valuable employees in Atlas Industries history. If this board cannot see past their biases to recognize her worth, then perhaps the problem isn't with her. It's with us. The silence was deafening. 12 powerful individuals processed the reality that their CEO was willing to fight for her, to risk his own political capital on defending their relationship. What are you proposing? Margaret Chen asked finally. I'm proposing we judge Candace by the same standards we judge everyone else. Performance, results, contribution to company success. I'm proposing we stop pretending that talented women who attract successful men must be using sex instead of skill. His voice grew stronger with each word, carrying the passion she'd seen in their private moments into this public arena. And I'm proposing, he continued, his eyes locked on hers, that Atlas Industries becomes a company that celebrates authentic relationships between colleagues who respect each other. Ruben's expression was unreadable. You're asking us to accept a relationship that could create ongoing conflicts of interest. I'm asking you to trust my judgment, Allesio replied, the same judgment that built this company from my father's construction business into a billion-dollar corporation. The same judgment that recognized Candace's potential when others couldn't see past their prejudices. He moved around the table until he stood behind her chair, his hands resting on her shoulders in a gesture of public support that sent ripples of shock through the room. Candace Morris is the woman I love, he said, his voice carrying absolute conviction. She's also the most talented marketing strategist this company has ever employed. Those facts are not contradictory, they're complementary. Candace felt tears building behind her eyes. He was choosing her. Publicly, completely, despite the risks and family pressure and corporate politics that made their relationship complicated. If this board cannot accept that exceptional people deserve exceptional love, he continued, then perhaps it's time for new leadership. The implicit threat was clear. Accept their relationship or lose their CEO. Tucker's face went pale, Ruben's expression shifted to calculation, and other board members exchanged glances that suggested the political landscape had just changed dramatically. All in favor of accepting Mr. Vaughn's position, Margaret Chen said after a long pause. 8 hands rose immediately. After another moment, 2 more joined them. Only Tucker and 1 ally maintained their opposition. Motion carries, Ruben announced, though his tone suggested the victory was grudging. As the board members filed out, offering congratulations that ranged from genuine to politics, Candace remained seated, overwhelmed by the magnitude of what had just happened. You didn't have to do that, she said when they were alone. Yes, I did, he replied, pulling her to her feet and into his arms, because you're worth fighting for, because what we have is worth defending, because I'm tired of letting other people's limitations define my possibilities. They'll make our lives difficult, she warned. Let them try, he said with quiet confidence. We'll face it together. 6 months later, Candace stood in the same boardroom where her career had almost ended, but now the atmosphere crackled with energy and excitement rather than judgment and disapproval. The Morrison campaign has exceeded every projection, she reported to faces that now showed respect instead of skepticism. Revenue is up 60% over traditional luxury campaigns. Customer retention has improved by 70%, and we've received collaboration requests from 15 major brands. The numbers spoke louder than gossip ever could. Success had a way of silencing critics and converting skeptics, proving that talent transcended scandal and results mattered more than relationships. Furthermore, she continued, our authentic marketing approach has positioned Atlas Industries as an industry leader. 3 competitors have attempted to replicate our strategy, but they lack the consumer insight that drives authentic connection. Applause filled the room, genuine appreciation for work that had transformed not just the company's marketing approach, but its entire culture. Any questions? She asked. Margaret Chen raised her hand with a smile. Just one. When do we announce your promotion to Chief Marketing Officer? The title she'd dreamed of but never dared reach for was finally within grasp, earned through work that spoke for itself and couldn't be diminished by whispers about her personal life. Today, Allesio said from his seat at the head of the table, his eyes shining with pride. Along with the announcement of Atlas Industries' new diversity and inclusion initiatives. After the meeting, they walked together through the building that had once felt hostile, but now hummed with the energy of positive change. The Morrison campaign's success had created ripple effects throughout the company. More diverse hiring, inclusive marketing strategies, workplace policies that supported rather than penalized authentic relationships. Regrets? Allesio asked as they entered his office. Oh, only one, she replied, moving into his arms with the easy familiarity of 6 months together. His brow lifted. Which is that we waited so long to admit what was already there. A low laugh rumbled from him, warm and sure. Then I might have the perfect remedy. He opened a desk drawer and drew out a velvet box. Her pulse stuttered as the diamond inside caught the afternoon light, scattering rainbows across the walls of the very room where they had first dared to speak their truth. Dropping to one knee, Allesio held, her gaze with the same unflinching resolve he brought to the boardroom. "Candace Morris," he said, voice steady, "will you marry me?" The question hung in the air between them, representing not just a proposal but a promise that their love was strong enough to survive corporate politics, family pressure, and a world that had tried to tear them apart. "Yes," she whispered, then louder as joy bubbled up from her chest. "Yes." The ring fit perfectly, as if it had been waiting for her finger as long as she'd been waiting for someone who saw her worth. As he slipped it into place, she thought about the journey that had brought them here, from that first conference room humiliation to this moment of perfect happiness. "I love you," she said, the words carrying the weight of every obstacle they'd overcome and every challenge they'd faced together. "I love you too," he replied, pulling her close for a kiss that tasted like promise and possibility, and the happy ending she'd stopped believing was possible for someone like her. "We'd love to hear from you. Have you ever had someone fight for you the way Allesio fought for Candace? Drop a comment sharing your story of finding someone who saw your worth when the world tried to diminish it. And if this story touched your heart, smash that like button and subscribe for more tales of love, conquering all odds. Tomorrow brings another journey of hearts, finding their way to each other against impossible circumstances. 1 year later, the Atlas Industries Christmas Gala sparkled with celebration and success. The Morrison campaign had won 3 industry awards. The company's stock had reached record highs, and the workplace culture transformation had attracted top talent from across the industry. Candace stood at the edge of the ballroom, watching employees dance and celebrate, marveling at how much had changed since that first conference room confrontation. Sienna had left for a competitor 6 months ago, unable to adapt to a culture that valued innovation over intimidation. Tucker had been transferred to the West Coast operation, where his traditional attitudes could do less damage to company morale. "Mrs. Vaughn," Carmen approached with champagne and a grin that could light up Chicago. "You look stunning." The title still sent thrills through Candace's chest. Mrs. Vaughn. Wife to the man who'd seen her worth when she couldn't see it herself, partner to someone who'd fought for their love when the world tried to tear them apart. "Thank you for everything," Candace said, embracing her best friend, "for believing in me when I didn't believe in myself, for pushing me to take chances, for standing by me when things got difficult." "That's what friends do," Carmen replied. "We see each other's potential and fight for it until they can fight for themselves." Across the room, Allesio was deep in conversation with board members, but his eyes found hers with the magnetic pull that had drawn them together from the beginning. He excused himself and moved through the crowd toward her, commanding attention without trying, making every other man in the room fade into background noise. "Dance with me," he said, offering his hand with the same gallant gesture that had marked every milestone of their relationship. On the dance floor, surrounded by colleagues who'd witnessed their love story unfold, they moved together with the easy rhythm of 2 people who'd learned to trust each other completely. "Happy?" he asked, his voice warm against her ear. "Completely," she replied, then pulled back to meet his eyes. "You?" "I'm married to the most brilliant, beautiful, extraordinary woman in the world," he said, spinning her in a move that made her laugh with pure joy. "I've never been happier." As the music swelled around them, Candace thought about the girl who'd walked into Atlas Industries 4 years ago, insecure, invisible, convinced she'd never be more than background noise in other people's stories. That girl couldn't have imagined this moment, this love, this life that felt like a fairy tale except for being absolutely real. "Thank you," she whispered. "For what?" "For seeing me when I was invisible, for fighting for us when I wanted to run, for loving me past my fears into the woman I was meant to be." "Thank you," he replied, his voice thick with emotion, "for being brave enough to let me love you, for changing my life, my company, my understanding of what success really means. They danced until the last song faded, surrounded by the warmth of celebration and the glow of love that had conquered every obstacle placed in its path. And as they finally left the ballroom together, Candace's wedding ring catching the light like a promise of forever, she knew that sometimes the most beautiful love stories were the ones that required the most courage to write. Because finding someone who sees your worth isn't just about luck, it's about being brave enough to let them see you completely, flaws and strengths and everything in between. It's about fighting for love when the world insists it's impossible, and believing in happy endings even when they seem too good to be true. And sometimes, just sometimes, the woman who was told she was too much discovers she's exactly enough for the man who was worth waiting for. The bullied plus-size employee had become the CEO's wife, but more importantly, she'd become the woman she was always meant to be, confident, successful, and deeply, completely loved. In a world that tried to diminish her worth, she'd found someone who celebrated every inch of who she was, and that, more than any corporate title or achievement, was the victory that mattered most. Their love story proved that when two hearts recognize their perfect match, no force on earth can keep them apart. Not corporate politics, not family pressure, not societal expectations that insist certain people don't belong together. Love, real love, writes its own rules. And Candace and Allesio had written a masterpiece.